I'm the host of Discover the Oak Ridges Moraine video series, Susan Lloyd Swale. This video series is a journey in learning about the Oak Ridges Moraine through visual exploration and interviews with experts. The Oak Ridges Moraine, known as Ontario's rain barrel, is a major source of groundwater for the Greater Toronto Area and the lifeblood of Ontario's greenbelt. But as you'll see in these videos, it is so much more. Conservation and restoration of the ecological integrity is vital to protect the moraine for future generations. In this episode, we talk with experts Kim Gavin, Rob Meservey, and former councillor Heather Stobel as they share their insights at the edge of the moraine. My special guest today is Kim Gavin from Conservation Ontario. Kim, can you tell us a little bit about your role as the CAO of Conservation Ontario?
Sure, I'm the General Manager with Conservation Ontario, and we're the association that supports Ontario's 36 conservation authorities across the province. So conservation authorities have been and continue to be critical on-the-ground partners in the protection, restoration and enhancement of the Oak Ridges Moraine. Back in the 1930s, there was a lot of concern with destabilization of soils and erosion, and a number of conservation groups came together in something that is now known as the Guelph Conference to identify actions that needed to be undertaken to protect areas across southern Ontario and the Oak Ridges Moraine. One of the things that they developed is the Ganaraska report, and that resulted in one of the recommendations being the planting of 8,000 hectares of trees, which is now known as the Ganaraska Forest here on the Oak Ridges Moraine.
Fabulous. And are there any projects beyond the Ganaraska Forest, which was a huge undertaking and is a beautiful forest today that people can hike and enjoy?
Absolutely. So right now, I believe it's over 14,000 hectares of land that collectively the conservation authorities own on the Oak Ridges Moraine. And there's 9 conservation authorities whose watersheds bump into the Oak Ridges Moraine. And the critical importance of this is they provide clean air, they provide clean water, and they provide a place that people can go and enjoy, both for mental and physical well-being. The conservation authorities were also critical in terms of supporting the legislation that eventually passed the Oak Ridges Moraine Conservation Plan. One of their critical roles is there was a requirement for municipalities to develop watershed plans, and those conservation authorities worked with their local municipalities in helping to develop those plans. One of the other critical jobs that the conservation authorities do is through their stewardship and restoration activities, both on lands that they own, their conservation authority owned lands, but also working with private landowners. And this is anything from planting trees to restoring wetlands, and we've even got a number of really critical tallgrass prairies on the Oak Ridges Moraine. So the conservation authorities work with these private landowners and other conservation groups to undertake these restoration efforts. And I think one of the things that's really important to understand is the Oak Ridges Moraine, while it might be protected through legislation, doesn't mean our job is done. We have to continue to be able to restore this important area. We have things like climate change, we have extreme weather events. In one sector we'll see droughts, in the other sector we'll see extreme flooding. So it's important that through these watershed studies and the research that conservation authorities do, that this information can be taken to help inform some of the changes that need to be made to protect the Oak Ridges Moraine.
Right. And the Oak Ridges Moraine is such an important source of groundwater, and the work that you do is so vital to maintaining those clean water sources. Can you tell us a little bit about watershed management and how the Oak Ridges Moraine is integral to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the conservation authorities were key partners in the groundwater management studies that have been undertaken by Steve Hollish. And those 9 conservation authorities, again, are really the boots on the ground who are collecting some of this data, doing the analysis, and looking at it on a watershed basis in terms of what you do in one area of the watershed could potentially have a negative impact downstream. So this holistic approach that conservation authorities use in their watershed planning is absolutely critical, and that's one of the reasons why the watershed plans were a requirement under the Oak Ridges Moraine Conservation Plan. The headwaters of a lot of these conservation areas in the Oak Ridges Moraine are critical for recharging those important groundwater sources.
Right, and you at conservation authorities, you have the expertise and the staff that understands these technical issues that are so important to the health of our communities. So thank you for all the work you do.
Thank you very much.
What are some of the benefits of conservation that citizens would see every day, or that make their quality of life so much better?
Well, drinking water is absolutely critical to our well-being, and again, I think the work that the conservation authorities do with other partners in protecting some of these critical groundwater sources are a key priority for certain. The other one is clean air. We're in this beautiful conservation area, and a number of these areas, they sequester carbon, and this is absolutely critical. And then lastly, what the pandemic has shown us is just how important green space is to the people of Ontario for not only their physical well-being, but also their mental well-being.
So vital this year. We really have valued these green spaces, and if you haven't, please get out and enjoy your conservation area. Rob Meservey is our next guest today. Can you talk to us a little bit about your experience working with 4 conservation authorities on the Oak Ridges Moraine?
And interestingly, all 4 of those conservation authorities have jurisdiction on the Oak Ridges Moraine. So the Oak Ridges Moraine has always been an area of significant interest to me in all the work I've done. We have a wonderful coalition of the 9 conservation authorities who have jurisdiction on the moraine. And starting about the year 2000, building on some earlier monitoring programs that were undertaken for the moraine, the 9 conservation authorities formed the Conservation Authorities Moraine Coalition. The Conservation Authorities Moraine Coalition gradually evolved into a really significant role in undertaking science, research, monitoring, assisting in policy development. The 9 conservation authorities together, with funding support from the Greenbelt Foundation and the Oak Ridges Moraine Foundation, undertook a very comprehensive monitoring and assessment of the Oak Ridges Moraine. This was really important in informing what was happening around the review by the province of the 4 very significant provincial plans, the Growth Plan, the Niagara Escarpment Plan, but importantly the Oak Ridges Moraine Plan. And so this report card looked at 4 really critical parameters or criteria to help everyone understand the state of the health of the moraine was at that time, and it sets a really strong foundation for monitoring work going forward. So this report card had the 9 CAs look very comprehensively at forest cover, at surface water quality, at groundwater quality and quantity as well combined, and also looked at fisheries and stream temperature as ways to really appreciate the status of the health of the moraine across all the watersheds. It graded for all 80 sub-watersheds or watersheds. In this case, this is surface water quality, and it rated the status of the health of these watersheds from A to F. And it's also set a framework for ongoing monitoring and research and science work. It helped identify where we don't have enough good information to really assess how some watersheds are being impacted by development activity or other changes in the landscape. There will be another iteration of the report card, and the moraine has this incredible ability to absorb and infiltrate water in the form of rainfall and precipitation. 10 times more so than the adjacent landscape, the till plains that are to the north and south of the moraine. So 10 times that absorptive capacity. So its role in not only collecting water, but then enabling it to be made available. 250,000 people draw their drinking water from the ground supplied by the Oak Ridges Moraine. There's 6 million people that live in those 80 watersheds who have some benefit in terms of of the water that originates on the moraine. So the knowledge about water quality, both surface and in the ground, it's an imperative.
Thank you, Rob, for coming today and speaking with us about this, and thank all our guests. I'm here today with Heather Stovall, and Heather was a city councillor at the City of Kawartha Lakes.
Yes.
And so you have a lot of experience with conservation authorities and municipalities, and as we know, municipalities implement the Oak Ridges Moraine Conservation Plan, but conservation authorities are really the boots on the ground, right?
Yes.
So can you tell us a little bit about that, how that partnership works?
Well, when people used to ask me about development on the Oak Ridges Moraine, and there is a provision for development under certain circumstances on the Oak Ridges Moraine. The planning department, which follows the Planning Act, would then bring in the Conservation Authority if the proposal was in an area which was either some sort of natural hazard or was in a regulated area, so near a water course or a lake or wetlands, that sort of thing.
Right.
And also if there were steep slopes, those sorts of features had to be considered.
So you really would rely on the expertise of the conservation authorities?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
They had the staff and the knowledge and the expertise to deal with the different challenges that you would face in those situations. And you want to make sure that you're protecting those features because they play an important function in terms of the water quality and the water quantity management. And in Kawartha Lakes, where we've had flooding on a number of occasions, that was very important. I often think of Toronto and, you know, the water coming out of the moraine and going down into Lake Ontario.
Mm-hmm.
And the flooding that they deal with now every so often with subways flooding. And that, you know, there's been development along the lakeshore,
Yeah.
and on farmland and the Oak Ridges Moraine,
Yes.
over time. And the more you do that, the more you reduce the permeability
Mm-hmm.
And the ability of the water, rainwater, to get into the moraine and into the water table, but you also increase the amount of water running off those impermeable areas. It would be nice if the Oak Ridges Marine Conservation Plan was enough,
Yeah.
but I think it only works if people understand what it's supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that means that we have to have some of the staff at the conservation authorities who understand some of the principles that are embedded in the conservation plan, as well as providing that kind of leadership and guidance to municipal officials when they're making planning decisions.
Well, thank you very much for coming here today and talking to us about the importance of the conservation authorities and opportunities to get involved and educate ourselves. Join us for new episodes to Discover the Moraine. There's lots to choose from.